The influence Greek philosophy on Christianity. Christianity emerged in a world dominated by Greek culture, Hellenism, which facilitated the absorption of philosophical ideas, especially through the figure of Saint Augustine, a theologian and philosopher, born on November 13, 354 AD in Tascait, and died August 28,430 AD in Hippo, Annaba, Algeria. Augustine fused the religion of the New Testament with the Neoplatonic tradition, shaping Christianity in the medieval era and Renaissance Protestantism. The influence of Greek philosophy is so striking that some theologians argue that Christian theology has become a mixture of Greek and Christian thought. Plato's philosophy, with its emphasis on the world of ideas, the immortal soul and the search for truth, resonated with many Christians. In the philosophical context, we must also give credit to Aristotle's thought. His logical formalism and method of empirical investigation also influenced Christian theology, especially in medieval scholasticism. And what is the relevance of this influence? The impact on theology. Greek philosophy contributed to the formulation of Christian doctrines such as the dogma of the Holy Trinity, the nature of Christian salvation. Some scholars argue that it Hellenized Christianity, distancing it from its primitive roots, that is, from biblical Judaism and the original message of Jesus. Well, people, what do we really know about early Christianity? Early Christianity was a diverse movement, with different groups and interpretations of Jesus' teachings. Some apocryphal texts reveal teachings considered mysterious or esoteric, which were not included in the traditional biblical canon. These teachings address topics such as the nature of the soul, the divine. The connection with the Essenes is a recent theory from the 20th century. The Essenes were a Jewish community that lived in Karam near the Dead Sea, and that had particular customs and beliefs. Some scholars argue that Jesus had some contact with them, or even was a member of this community. However, there is no consensus among scholars. And secret organizations such as the Rosicrucian claim that Jesus was tradition. Well, folks, this is what we know about early Christianity. Well, I talked about eyes to establish a distinction between Greek philosophy and medieval Christianity. Christian theology developed over the centuries, incorporating different philosophical and cultural influences. Greek philosophy was one of these, but not the only one. The nature of Christ is one of the most debated and complex themes in Christian theology. Over the centuries, different interpretations have emerged seeking to reconcile the divinity and humanity of Christ. Neoplatonism, with its emphasis on the one as the source of all reality, influenced both Diophysitism and Monophysitism. The idea of a transcendent divine reality and the belief in a mystical union with the divine resonated in both conceptions. Platonism, with its distinction between the sensible world and the divine, also contributed to the debate on the nature of Christ. The idea that the human soul is immortal and the belief in the pre-existence of the soul influenced the understanding of the incarnation of Christ and his relationship with humanity. And what is Diophysitism? Defined by some ecumenical councils such as that of Chalcedon in 451 AD, it states that in Christ there are two distinct natures, one divine and the other human without separation. This conception sought to preserve the integrity of both natures, emphasizing that Christ is true God and true man. And what is Monophysitism? Argued that in Christ, arguing that the union with human nature transformed or absorbed it. Now, to better understand, what does the word Christ mean? In Greek we have two interpretations, the first Christus, which meant a state of superior nature, and the second Christus, which meant a state of inferior nature. Well, Christus and Christos, both states of the nature of reality to disbelieve a status consciousness. Pagan wisdom, or commonly Greek wisdom, especially in the Hellenistic period, developed long before the emergence of Christianity. Philosophical schools such as Stoicism and Epicureanism explored ethical, metaphysical, and epistemological questions that profoundly influenced Western thought. The early Christian communities emerged in a context of great social and spiritual transformations. These communities were formed by humble people who united around the teachings of Jesus, and gathered to pray, share food, and discuss the scriptures, and the practice of solidarity was a fundamental characteristic. Greek philosophy provided many elements. A basis for the rationalization and systematization of Christian doctrines. Early Christian thinkers such as Clement of Alexandria believed that it could help to better understand the Christian faith. A priori Hellenistic influence on Christian doctrine. Both Stoicism and Christianity emphasizes the importance of virtue and morality. In Stoicism, virtue is moral excellence, the only truly good thing, while the teachings contained in the New Testament. Stoicism teaches indifference to worldly pleasures and pains as a path to freedom and tranquility. Christianity, on the other, a life of holiness and devotion to God. The abstraction of pleasures in Christianity is more related to the goal of achieving salvation according to the divine will. Therefore, while there is a clear influence of Hellenistic on Christian doctrine, especially regarding morality and the abstraction of pleasures, these influences are reinterpreted and adapted within the context of the Christian faith, and this has resulted in a unique and distinct approach to the moral and virtuous life in Western civilization. A very important point to be addressed now. After the birth of Christianity, there was a significant change in the vision of the universe. Previously, Greek philosophy, especially Aristotelian philosophy, saw the universe in an objective way, where the knower becomes identical to the know object. In other words, external reality was reflected directly in the mind of the knower. In Stoicism, the subject begins to acquire a certain autonomy in relation to the object. Stoicism emphasizes the ability of the subject to maintain equanimity and autonomy, not depending entirely on the outside world to define its identity or well-being. On the other hand, Christianity introduced the ideas of an autonomous subject that, although living in the world, has an independence that expressed through a direct and personal relationship with God, where the subject has a spiritual life of its own and identity that is not defined only by physical world, but by its faith and its relationship with the divine. A brief consideration of Stoicism is in a Greco-Roman philosophy that has existed for several centuries. The Stoicism believed that living in accordance with reason and nature was the only true good, and that negative emotions such as fear and anger arise from errands and judgment. The Stoics believed that virtue is the only true good and that all other things such as wealth, health, and pleasures are indifferent. This means that we should not pursue these things as ends in themselves, but rather as means to achieving virtue. The Stoics believed that the universe is governed by a universal reason, the logos, and that should live in accordance with this reason and nature. This means that should accept what we cannot control and focus on what we can, which is our own behavior. The Stoics believed that self-control and discipline are the keys to a way of life that is more in line with the higher reality of life. In addition to the Hellenistic influence on Christianity, I fear Epicureanism, which emphasized that the goal of life is to achieve happiness through moderate pleasure and the absence of pain. Aponia and ataraxia. Aponia is the absence of physical pain, while ataraxia is the combination of the two was the key to happiness. Well, this is a brief account of the influence of Hellenistic philosophy on Christianity. It is something to reflect on in our daily lives. Thank you for watching the content. Consider subscribe to the channel.